Hi, I'm Lizzie Kurtzer, your inner connection coach, and I'm passionate about connection, belonging, talking about shame, and the menstrual cycle. And today I want to share about why I'm such a big advocate for menstrual cycle awareness, which is essentially knowing where you are in your cycle on any given day and tracking your cycle. I think the first thing to talk about really is about how women and menstruators aren't taught about their menstrual cycle. You know, we're just not taught about the different phases of our cycle. We know about our periods. A lot of people will experience or know or talk about like feeling a bit rough before their periods. But outside that, we don't really know what's happening and we kind of just get on with life. And because of this, and because of all we really know about is a 24-hour cycle, so much of our experience as menstruators that we read as wrong. You know, shame, to quote Brené Brown, is the intensely painful feeling or experience that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love, connection, and belonging. And for women and menstruators, you know, we think our bodies are flawed. Like, for so many of us, that's already our belief. That's how we have always moved through life. Because we're not taught about our menstrual cycle, and we benchmark ourselves against this 24-hour cycle, and words like steadiness, consistency, being balanced, having balanced hormones, and this belief that we're meant to be the same every day, and we're just not, right? The combination of our hormones are doing something different every single day, and that means how we feel, how we think, what we need, what our body's prioritizing, etc., is different every day of our cycle. So that is first baseline why I'm such an advocate for it, because we walk around every day with this belief that there's something kind of wrong with us, and we read a lot of our experience as wrong versus intelligence, feedback, knowledge, and that being our natural rhythm. So I'm a big advocate for it because of that. But when you start tracking your cycle and you start to learn your natural rhythm, it kind of opens up this gateway for this new way of being with yourself. Because first, I'm sort of repeating what I just said, but it gives you a sense of belonging, because rather than thinking there's something wrong with you, you start to learn your natural rhythm and kind of understand your cycle. And so rather than feeling like there's something wrong with you, you know that this is just me. This is who I am. This is how my body moves. This is my cycle. And that invites a sense of connection and belonging with ourselves. When we start to track our cycle, rather than judging ourselves, as I've mentioned, reading everything is wrong, we start to be a little bit curious. Okay, I'm on day 7 of my cycle, and I'm noticing this. And that's typically how I feel. Or, gosh, I'm noticing day 7 feels a little bit different. Normally I feel really, bright and optimistic. And today I'm noticing I'm feeling anxious, curious. Okay, what can I do with that? And I think as well, it helps us to build our compassion muscle. So again, it invites in more curiosity, and then it invites in compassion. Gosh, I feel really tired. I feel really raw. I feel really exposed. And that's really understandable, because I recognize I'm 2 days out from my period and I'm in the void, and I kind of really recognize that, and bringing in that compassion model. So it starts to build these ways of relating to ourselves that so many people, want to develop. I wish I was more compassionate with myself. And you can do that through the menstrual cycle and through menstrual cycle awareness. It helps us to practice giving ourselves what we need. I mean, first of all, it helps us to recognize what we need, and that our needs are changing and fluctuating. Again, that's something, I repeat this a lot, but I talk about this a lot, about how women are conditioned to believe that a good woman is a woman with no needs. Menstruators are conditioned to believe that to be a good human, we shouldn't have any needs. And we're really detached from our needs. When we practice menstrual cycle awareness, it's this beautiful container that starts to orient us back towards ourselves and helps us start to notice what we might need different on any given day, because our needs are different depending where we are in our cycle. And again, rather than that being a shameful thing, we start to notice and being oh, okay, and how does that make sense for me? And so not only does it start to orient us towards ourselves and reveal our needs, we can start to then practice giving themselves to ourselves. And that's just huge. You know, so like no matter what kind of journey you are on with yourself, no matter where it is that you're trying to move towards your goals, you know, so many people just want a more fulfilling life, and they want to be happy, and they want to be confident. And the menstrual cycle, helping you to understand your needs, satisfy your needs, give yourself what you want. You know, when we can practice that on a small basis, on the everyday basis, that's when we can start to apply it to the bigger things in our life. When we can really nourish ourselves, really listen to ourselves, and really give to ourselves, that kind of has a trickle effect and expands to the other areas of our life. So it's this really beautiful container, safe container that gently orients you back to yourself, and then lets you practice listening, giving. It's trial and error. Sometimes you'll get it wrong, sometimes you'll get it right, and that's all like this evidence and this like muscle that you build with yourself. I think menstrual cycle awareness helps us to recognize the different parts of ourselves. Again, we live in this world that kind of wants us to be the same every day. And I think women and menstruators will often read their different parts as wrong and conflicting. And it's like, why do sometimes I feel really playful and childish and like energetic, and then sometimes I feel really introverted and wise and quiet? Yes, sometimes why is it that I want to just be a little kid again, and I want to play with my makeup, or I want to play with like paint or something, and sometimes I just don't want to do that. Like why is that? And that's because we obviously have different parts of ourselves and different expressions of ourselves, and the menstrual cycle again is this beautiful safe container that reveals these different parts to ourselves, and then we can like play with them and start to engage with them and figure out how we want to express those parts of ourselves and make space for those parts of ourselves, because we're not just one. You know, we're not just one way. We don't have just one part of ourselves. We kind of have many parts that like to be expressed in different ways, and can we make space for those? You know, this is where you hear a lot of people as well say things like, I thought I was crazy, I thought there was something wrong with me. You know, I was looking at the DSM-V and wondering, did I have a personality disorder or a mood disorder? Because we think we're meant to be exactly the same every day. Why is it that last week I felt wonderful in that outfit and it just felt like spot on, and my confidence was exuding, and this week it just doesn't feel like me? That's okay. That's kind of all normal. And the menstrual cycle reveals that to us and shows that to us in a really safe container. It reconnects us with our body, right? Like our bodies are us. And I talk a lot about how particularly diet culture, but there are many other things, but diet culture really cuts us off from our bodies. And our menstrual cycle is this like direct line back into our bodies. And so we can, start to like forge this relationship again with our body and do the healing work around that might have previously felt really difficult. It's like a little window back into our bodies and back into ourselves. Gosh, I'm sure there are lots of other reasons that I'll walk away and I'll think of them, but they're just a handful of reasons why I'm such an advocate for tracking our menstrual cycle. One more that's just quickly come to mind as well, well, two more I'm going to say actually, is it really helps our relationships, our intimate relationships, so whether that's friends, families, or a partner. You know, one, if we can understand what we need better, we're always like, that's going to be much easier in relationships to advocate for what we need. And we can articulate that to our friends and our family and our partners. And I think partners, whether they also have a menstrual cycle themselves or not, you know, want to understand this stuff, like want to understand it. So it just like brings another layer of intimacy, another layer of like communication and depth to a relationship. And then also it's really fantastic in the workplace, right? Like, where are my strengths? Where in my cycle do I find this task easier? Where in my cycle do I find this task a little trickier? Where am I in my cycle am I super communicative and really great at presentations or really good at teamwork? And where in my cycle do I just prefer to do a bit of like solo work? Where in my cycle do I need to be aware of that my inner critic gets a little bit loud and I get a little judgy? And how can I support myself around that? And again, it enables us to put some boundaries in with ourselves rather than it being like quite feeling like it's quite erratic and that you have no control over these things. Like, can I bring in some boundaries and some support? And that's why I love to bring menstrual cycle awareness into the workplace, because it really supports women and menstruators with their ability to show up and excel in their careers. I'll leave it there. Again, if you're tracking your cycle, I'd love for you to share maybe some of the biggest things, like what are your top takeaways? Like what has it given you that you didn't expect menstrual cycle awareness to give you? If you're not tracking your cycle and you're curious about how to track your cycle, I'll put a link in the show notes, but head to my website and there's some really great resources around that. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.